My name is Marcus Webb, and I learned everything I know about patience from watching my father lose arguments he should have won. He was the kind of man who backed down when cashiers shortchanged him, who apologized when other drivers cut him off, who taught his children that keeping the peace was always worth more than being right. He died when I was 19, massive heart attack at 51, and I remember thinking at his funeral that the world had crushed a good man under the weight of all the times he refused to push back. My sister Olivia was 17 when Dad died. She just started driving, and Mom, still raw from grief and barely holding our finances together, did what practical people do when they're broke and desperate. She found the cheapest running vehicle in our town and paid cash for it. $350 for a 1985 gold Geo Metro that looked like someone had dipped it in rust and disappointment. The car was objectively terrible. The passenger door scraped when you opened it. The exhaust system sounded like a swarm of dying bees. And the driver's side mirror, the one detail that would later change everything, was held onto the door frame with approximately half a roll of silver duct tape. My mother looked at that mirror, looked at Olivia and said, "Don't hit anything and it'll be fine." Olivia named the car Goldie, which I thought was generous considering it looked more like a mobile dumpster than anything deserving affection. But she loved that car the way you love things that are yours when you've never had much. She kept the interior spotless. She checked the oil every week. She learned to pump gas without looking at the total, because watching the numbers climb made her anxious about money in a way that reminded me too much of Mom. I was working construction that summer, trying to save money for community college classes I'd deferred twice already. Olivia was pulling shifts at Pizza Hut, coming home smelling like grease and pepperoni, counting her tips at the kitchen table with the kind of focus other kids reserved for video games. We were two kids trying to build futures out of wreckage, and that Metro was the chariot that was supposed to carry us there. The car lasted exactly 4 months before someone else's carelessness turned it into evidence. October 14th, 2006. A Saturday. Olivia was scheduled for a day shift but needed to pick up her check first, something about direct deposit not kicking in yet. She left the house at 4:30 in the afternoon, right when the autumn sun starts doing that aggressive thing where it turns every windshield into a wall of molten copper. I was home, half-heartedly watching college football and wondering if I'd ever actually get to attend the college I was supposedly saving for. Mom was at her second job. She'd taken a weekend position at a dry cleaner to cover the gap Dad's death had left in our monthly budget. The house was quiet in that specific way houses get when everyone's gone and you're alone with your thoughts about mortality and money. My phone rang at 4:53. Olivia's name on the caller ID. Her voice was shaking. "Marcus, I got hit. I'm okay, but the car is really bad." I was in my truck and moving before she finished the sentence. The Pizza Hut was only 6 minutes away, but I made it in 4, blowing through a stop sign and calculating whether I should call Mom or wait until I knew more. Olivia was standing in the parking lot next to what was left of Goldie, and even from 50 feet away, I could see she was holding herself together with pure adrenaline. The Metro's front driver's side was destroyed. The wheel bent inward at an angle that defied engineering. The door frame crumpled like aluminum foil. The hood buckled. And there, lying flat on the asphalt directly below where it had been attached, was the duct-taped mirror, not torn away, not dragging, just lying there perfectly perpendicular to the car like a bookmark someone had carefully placed. "I was barely moving," Olivia said before I could ask. "The sun was right in my eyes and I couldn't see anything, so I was going super slow. Then this Suburban she just backed right into me. She didn't even look." The Suburban was parked 20 feet away. Black, massive, one of those early 2000s models that made everyone driving them feel like they could survive an apocalypse. There was a small dent in the rear bumper. That was it. Next to it stood a woman in her mid-40s, designer sunglasses, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing with her free hand like she was explaining something to someone who wasn't understanding her properly. A sheriff's deputy was already there, Officer Daniels, according to his name tag, a guy maybe 10 years older than me with the patient demeanor of someone who'd worked 1,000 minor accidents and knew exactly how these things went. He was photographing the scene, measuring distances, writing in a notebook with the methodical attention of someone building a record. "Your sister was nearly stopped when the impact occurred," he told me quietly while the suburban driver was still on her phone. "The mirror falling straight down tells the story. If she'd been moving at any real speed, it would have torn away at an angle. Basic physics." I looked at the woman by the suburban. She'd hung up and was now watching us, arms crossed, expression unreadable behind those sunglasses. She looked like someone who'd never paid full consequences for anything in her life. Officer Daniels finished his report. Both parties exchanged insurance information. The woman, her name was Catherine Brennan, we learned from her insurance card, apologized to Olivia at the scene. Said she hadn't seen the car. Said she'd been distracted. Said these things happen and she was glad no one was hurt. We had the metro towed to our driveway. Mom came home from work, saw the wreckage, hugged Olivia until my sister started crying, and then made the first of many phone calls to our insurance company. That's when Catherine Brennan's version of events started to change. 3 weeks passed. The metro sat in our driveway like a monument to bad luck, gathering leaves and rainwater. Mom had started making calls about replacement vehicles, doing math on scratch paper at the kitchen table, trying to figure out how we'd afford another car when we were still catching up from funeral expenses. Then the letter arrived. It was from Apex Insurance Group, Catherine Brennan's carrier. Professionally formatted, corporate letterhead, the kind of letter that sounds polite while threatening you. I watched Mom's face as she read it, watched her expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something harder that I'd rarely seen from her. "They're saying Olivia was speeding," Mom said quietly. "They're saying their client, Mrs. Brennan, was not at fault. They're demanding that our insurance cover the damage to her vehicle." Olivia was in her room doing homework. I took the letter from Mom's hand and read it myself. The language was careful, calculated. According to Mrs. Brennan's revised statement, Olivia had been driving recklessly through the parking lot. The collision was the result of excessive speed and failure to maintain control. Mrs. Brennan had been properly checking her mirrors when Olivia's vehicle appeared suddenly and made impact unavoidable. It was fiction, complete calculated fiction. "She apologized at the scene," I said. "I was there. Officer Daniels wrote down that she admitted she didn't see Olivia. This is, Mom, this is insurance fraud." Mom didn't answer right away. She was staring at the letter like it was written in a language she was still learning to read. Finally, she said, "Get me the police report." Officer Daniels had given us a copy at the scene. I found it in the kitchen drawer where we kept important papers, birth certificates, medical records, the documents that prove you exist and matter. Mom spread it on the table and we read through it together. Officer Daniels had been thorough. He'd noted the position of the mirror, the lack of skid marks, the sunset glare, the angle of impact. His conclusion was stated plainly. Vehicle 2, Brennan, reversed from parking space without ensuring path was clear. Vehicle 1, Webb, was traveling at low speed or stopped at time of collision. Vehicle 2, driver at fault. Mom photographed every page of that report. Then she called our insurance company and read them the letter from Apex. Our agent, a tired-sounding woman named Patricia who'd handled Dad's life insurance claim, listened and then sighed in a way that suggested she'd fought this battle before. "They're lowballing you because they think you won't fight back," Patricia said. "They're betting you need the money badly enough to accept a terrible settlement. Do you want me to push back?" "What would that look like?" Mom asked. "We'd offer them a settlement equal to what you paid for the vehicle, $350. If they accept, everyone walks away. If they refuse, this goes to court or arbitration, and that's a mess nobody wants. Mom looked at me. I looked at the police report. I thought about Dad, about all the times he'd let people walk over him because fighting back felt expensive and exhausting and not worth the emotional cost. Send the offer, Mom said. Patricia sent it. Apex rejected it within 48 hours. And then came the sentence that changed everything, written in Catherine Brennan's own words at the bottom of the rejection letter. I will not be paying anything for a collision I did not cause. If your client believes otherwise, they are welcome to take me to court. Mom read that line 3 times. Then she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, not outrage, but something colder and more dangerous. Resolve. Okay, Mom said quietly. We'll take her to court. Small claims court in our county had a filing fee of $75 and a maximum claim limit of $5,000. To file, you needed documentation of damages. That meant getting an official repair estimate from a certified auto body shop, which meant paying someone to look at a car that everybody knew was totaled and tell us exactly how totaled it was. Mom called Morrison's Auto Body on Monday morning. Earl Morrison had been fixing cars in our town since before I was born, a 60-something guy with oil-stained hands and a reputation for honest work. His shop smelled like paint fumes and coffee, and every available surface was covered in parts catalogs from decades past. Earl walked around the metro like a surgeon examining a corpse. He took photographs from every angle. He lay down on the garage floor and looked at the undercarriage. He opened the crumpled door with a pry bar and studied the frame damage. Finally, he straightened up and said, "You want the truth or the insurance truth?" "What's the difference?" Mom asked. "Truth is this car's not worth fixing. Insurance truth is if someone's legally obligated to restore it to pre-accident condition. Here's what that's gonna cost." He went to his computer, an ancient desktop that looked like it still ran Windows 98, and started searching parts databases. I watched his expression shift from focused to puzzled to something close to amused. "Problem," Earl said. "Geo Metro parts for an '85 model basically don't exist anymore. Junkyards don't stock them. Online retailers show nothing. These cars either got crushed years ago or they're still limping along with whatever original parts haven't fallen off yet." "So you can't fix it?" I asked. "Didn't say that. Said I can't find replacement panels, but I can repair the existing ones. Pull the dents, straighten the frame, match the paint, replace the mechanical components. It'll take time and labor, but it's doable." He typed for another 10 minutes, pulling up labor rates, parts prices for the wheel assembly and suspension components, paint and materials costs. The printer wheezed out 3 pages of itemized estimates. Earl handed them to Mom. "Total comes to $4,173.18. That's parts, labor, and materials, all documented and certified. You take this to court. This is what it'll legally cost to make you whole." Mom stared at the number. I stared at the number. Olivia, who'd insisted on coming along, stared at the number. "We paid $350 for this car," Mom said quietly. "I know," Earl said, "but that's not how liability works. She damaged your property. Legally, she owes you the cost to restore it, not the cost to replace it. If she'd wanted to avoid this, she should have settled when you gave her the chance." Mom paid Earl $50 for the estimate and we drove home in silence. That night, she spread the paperwork across the kitchen table one more time. The police report, the insurance letters, the rejection, the estimate. Then she filled out the small claims court filing, attached every piece of documentation, and wrote a check for $75. "I'm doing this for your father," she said to no one in particular. "He spent his whole life letting people push him around. I'm not doing that anymore." The court date was set for 6 weeks out. We waited. Before trial, the court scheduled a mandatory mediation session. a last attempt to settle things without wasting a judge's time. It was held in a small conference room at the county courthouse, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, fake wood paneling on the walls, the kind of space that made everyone in it feel slightly depressed. Mom wore the black dress she'd worn to Dad's funeral. I wore khakis and a button-down shirt I'd borrowed from a friend. Olivia wore her Pizza Hut uniform because she had a shift right after. We looked like what we were, working-class people who couldn't afford to take a full day off for legal proceedings. Catherine Brennan showed up in yoga pants and a fleece jacket, carrying a purse that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. No lawyer, no documents, just confidence. The mediator was a woman named Rosa Herrera, mid-50s, with the exhausted patience of someone who'd listened to thousands of petty disputes and no longer believed in humanity's capacity for reasonableness. "Let's start with the facts," Ms. Herrera said. "Mrs. Webb, you're claiming Mrs. Brennan's vehicle damaged yours and you're seeking $4,000 in repair costs. Mrs. Brennan, you're claiming Mrs. Webb's daughter was at fault. Do I have that right?" Both sides nodded. "Okay, Mrs. Webb, do you have documentation?" Mom slid a folder across the table. Ms. Herrera spent 5 minutes reading through everything. The police report with Officer Daniel's notes about the mirror's position, the photographs, the repair estimate, the timeline of events. "Mrs. Brennan, do you have any evidence that contradicts the police report?" "I know what happened," Catherine said. "That girl was speeding. She came out of nowhere. The police officer wasn't there when it happened. He showed up after. He doesn't know what he's talking about." "The police officer documented physical evidence," Ms. Herrera said evenly. "The position of the mirror suggests the Webb vehicle was stopped or nearly stopped. Do you have any evidence that disputes that?" "My word should be enough." There was a long silence. Ms. Herrera wrote something on her notepad, then she looked at Mom. "Mrs. Webb, are you willing to settle?" Mom pulled out a single sheet of paper. I'd watched her prepare it the night before, handwriting it carefully in blue ink. She slid it across to Catherine Brennan. $350, Mom said. "That's what I paid for the car. You pay that, we're done. No court, no judgment, no lawyers. Just make me whole and we both walk away." Catherine didn't even pick up the paper. She looked at Mom with an expression that I can only describe as contempt mixed with pity. "I'm not paying a cent for an accident I didn't cause," Catherine said. "If you want to waste the court's time pursuing this, that's your choice. But I'm not settling." Ms. Herrera looked at Mom. "Do you want to proceed to trial?" Mom stood up. "Yes." We left the mediation room and walked past Catherine Brennan in the hallway. She was already on her phone, laughing about something, her voice echoing off the marble floors. She didn't look worried. She didn't look concerned. She looked like someone who'd never lost at anything and couldn't imagine starting now. In the car on the way home, Olivia said, "Mom, what if we lose?" Mom didn't answer right away. She was staring straight ahead, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, jaw set in that way that meant she was fighting back tears. "Then we lose," Mom finally said, "but at least we fought." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. 20 seats for observers, a judge's bench that looked like it had been there since the building opened, fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly jaundiced. Judge Harold Brennan, no relation to Catherine, we checked, presided. He was in his late 60s, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of judge who'd heard every lie and excuse and desperate justification the human mind could produce. Catherine Brennan sat at the defendant's table with a legal pad and a ballpoint pen, still no lawyer. We sat at the plaintiff's table with our folder of documentation. The bailiff called the case. Judge Brennan asked Catherine to present her version of events first. She stood and spoke with the confidence of someone who believed absolutely in her own narrative. She described driving through the Pizza Hut parking lot, carefully backing out of her space, checking all mirrors and her backup camera. Then suddenly, her word, suddenly, Olivia's car appeared, moving at high speed, too fast for Catherine to react. The impact was entirely unavoidable, Catherine said. I did everything right. The other driver was reckless. I shouldn't be held responsible for someone else's poor decision-making. Judge Brennan wrote something down. Do you have any evidence to support this account? I have my testimony. No witnesses, no photographs, no dash camera footage. No, but I'm a credible person. I've never been in an accident before. I have no reason to lie. Judge Brennan nodded slowly. Mrs. Webb, your turn. Mom didn't stand. She stayed seated and spoke in a voice that was quieter than Catherine's but somehow carried more weight. Your Honor, I'm not going to argue about what happened. The police report does that for me. Officer Daniels documented physical evidence that proves my daughter was stopped or nearly stopped when the collision occurred. The defendant has no evidence to contradict that report. She rejected multiple settlement offers, including one for just the purchase price of the vehicle. So now we're here, asking for exactly what the law allows: the documented cost to restore our property to its pre-accident condition. She slid the folder across to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Brennan spent 10 minutes reading every page. Then he looked up. Mrs. Brennan, you were backing out of a parking space, correct? Yes. And your vehicle struck the front driver's side of the other vehicle, correct? Yes, but... Which means the other vehicle was either stopped or moving forward past your parking space when contact occurred, correct? Catherine hesitated. I suppose, but she was going too fast. If she was going too fast while moving forward and you were backing up, then you backed into a vehicle that had the right of way. The law is clear on this point. Vehicles exiting parking spaces must yield to vehicles in the travel lane. Do you dispute that? I dispute that I'm at fault. Judge Brennan removed his reading glasses. The police report documents that the plaintiff's vehicle mirror fell straight down, indicating minimal forward momentum at the time of impact. The report also notes the lack of skid marks, further supporting low speed or a stopped position. The defendant has provided no evidence to contradict these findings. The plaintiff has documented repair costs totaling $4,173.18 from a certified auto body shop. He paused. Catherine's face had gone pale. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $4,173.18, plus court costs of $75, for a total judgment of $4,248.18. The defendant has 30 days to remit payment. The gavel came down. Catherine sat frozen. She actually asked the bailiff to repeat the number. He did. Then she looked at Mom with an expression of pure, undiluted shock, as if reality itself had just betrayed her. We walked out of that courtroom and stood in the hallway for a long moment, none of us quite believing it was over. Olivia started crying, not sad crying, but the kind of crying that happens when pressure you didn't know you were carrying suddenly releases. Mom hugged her. I just stood there, feeling something that I slowly realized was a kind of grief for my father, who'd never learned to fight back. The check arrived 27 days later, not from Catherine Brennan personally, but from Apex Insurance Group. Her carrier had apparently decided that paying out was cheaper than fighting an appeal they had no chance of winning. The amount was exact: $4,248.18. Mom deposited it on a Thursday afternoon. That evening, she sat us down at the kitchen table, me, Olivia, and my younger brother Danny, who'd been mostly on the sidelines of this whole drama, and spread out a handwritten budget. This is what we're doing, Mom said. $2,000 goes toward a replacement car for Olivia, something reliable, not another beater. $1,000 goes into savings for emergencies because clearly we need that. The rest we're going to use for something your father would have wanted. She didn't elaborate then, but 2 weeks later, Mom announced we were taking a long weekend trip to the coast, something we hadn't done since before Dad died, something that had always felt too expensive, too frivolous, too much like a luxury we couldn't justify. We drove west in early November, all four of us crammed into Mom's sedan, and stayed in a cheap motel that smelled like mildew and old carpet. We ate at diners and walked on the beach and didn't talk about the lawsuit or the money or Catherine Brennan. On the last evening, watching the sun set over the Pacific, Mom said, "Your father would have just let it go. He would have taken that 350 settlement or maybe nothing at all. And he would have told himself it was the right thing to do because conflict scared him more than losing money." "But you didn't," Olivia said. "No," Mom agreed. "I didn't, and I hope that's the kind of lesson that matters more than the money." 6 months after the judgment, I ran into Officer Daniels at a gas station. He recognized me immediately. "Your mom's case," he said, smiling. "That one made the rounds at the department. Judge Brennan actually used it as an example in a training session about why physical evidence matters more than confident testimony." "Did you ever hear what happened to Mrs. Brennan?" I asked. "Heard Apex dropped her policy. Also heard she tried to dispute the judgment and hire a lawyer for an appeal, but no one would take the case. The police report was too clear." He paused. "She made this a lot more expensive than it needed to be." That was an understatement. Between the judgment, court costs, the increased insurance premiums she'd face for years after being dropped by her carrier, and whatever legal consultations she'd paid for, Catherine Brennan had turned a $350 settlement into probably $10,000 in total consequences. Olivia drove her replacement car, a 7-year-old Honda Civic with 140,000 miles and a functioning everything, for the next 4 years until she saved enough to upgrade. She named that one Goldie too, which I thought was sentimental until she explained that it was a reminder that even things that get destroyed can be replaced with something better. Mom never said much more about the lawsuit after that beach trip, but I noticed small changes in her. She stopped apologizing reflexively when customer service made mistakes. She started asking for supervisors when companies tried to shortchange her. She taught Danny, who's 15 now, to document everything and keep receipts and never let people rewrite history just because they're confident liars. As for me, the whole experience changed how I think about justice. I used to believe the legal system was this expensive, inaccessible thing designed for people with resources, and maybe that's true for major cases. But small claims court, that's designed for people like us. $75 to file. No lawyers required. Just evidence, documentation, and a willingness to let the truth speak for itself. I'm 34 now. Olivia's 32, married, working as a paralegal. A career choice she says was inspired by watching Mom navigate that lawsuit. Danny's in college, studying engineering. Mom's retired from the dry cleaner but still works part-time at the job she actually likes, the one she kept after Dad died because it gave her something to do with her grief. The Geo Metro became a family legend. We tell the story at holidays, always starting with the detail about the duct-taped mirror and ending with the judge's gavel. New people marrying into the family have to hear it. It's practically an initiation ritual. But here's what we don't talk about as much. Catherine Brennan was probably a decent person who made a bad decision and then compounded it with pride. She backed into a car without looking, an everyday mistake millions of people make. The tragedy wasn't the collision. The tragedy was her refusal to acknowledge the mistake, her decision to construct a false narrative, her assumption that we'd be too intimidated or too poor to fight back. Pride is expensive. That's the lesson. Not that you should always fight every battle, but that when you choose to rewrite the truth to avoid minor consequences, you risk creating major ones. That duct-taped mirror falling straight down was the detail that saved us. If it had torn away at an angle, Catherine's story might have held up. If there'd been skid marks, if Officer Daniels hadn't been so thorough, If Earl Morrison hadn't been willing to do a repair estimate on a car nobody would actually repair, any of those variables could have changed the outcome. But they didn't. The evidence aligned. The truth was simple, and a judge who'd spent decades listening to lies recognized honesty when he saw it. I keep a photograph of that Geo Metro on my phone. It's in the background of a family picture from 2006, before the accident, just visible in the driveway behind us. The gold paint that looked like regret, the dented panels, the duct-taped mirror catching the sunlight. Sometimes when I'm stuck in traffic, or dealing with some petty injustice at work, or watching someone lie confidently about something I know is false, I think about that mirror, how it fell straight down, how physics doesn't care about your narrative or your pride or your insurance company's calculations. Evidence is evidence, truth is truth, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the system works exactly the way it's supposed to. Mom died 2 years ago. Heart failure, sudden, just like Dad. She was 63. At her funeral, Olivia told the Metro story during the eulogy, and the entire room laughed in that bittersweet way people laugh when they're remembering someone who taught them to be braver than they knew they could be. After the service, a woman approached me, someone I didn't recognize, maybe mid-50s, dressed in black. She introduced herself as Rosa Herrera, the mediator from our case. "I remember your mother," she said. "I do thousands of mediations. Most people settle even when they shouldn't because they're scared of court. Your mother wasn't scared. She was just determined to be treated fairly. That's rare." I thanked her for remembering. She shook her head. "I'm the one who should thank her. That case reminded me why I do this work. Most of what I see is people being petty or greedy or dishonest. Your mother was just asking to be made whole. That's what the law is supposed to do." Catherine Brennan never contacted us after the judgment, never apologized, never acknowledged what happened. For all I know, she's told the story her way 1,000 times, casting herself as the victim of an unjust system and a lying teenager and a biased judge. People are good at that, rewriting their own histories until the lies feel true. But in some courthouse filing cabinet, there's a record. A police report with Officer Daniel's careful documentation, an estimate from Earl Morrison, a judgment signed by Judge Harold Brennan, evidence that exists independent of anyone's narrative, proof that sometimes the truth survives even when people try to bury it. That's what I learned from a $350 car with a duct-taped mirror. Not that justice is guaranteed, but that it's possible. Not that fighting back always works, but that not fighting back guarantees you'll lose. My father spent his life avoiding conflict, and it killed him at 51 with stress-related heart disease. My mother spent one afternoon refusing to back down, and it taught her children that they didn't have to accept every injustice that came their way. The cost of the car was $350. The cost of repair was $4,000. The cost of arrogance was everything Catherine Brennan paid in the years after: money, insurance rates, reputation, the knowledge that she'd turned a minor fender bender into a public judgment against her character. But the value was teaching 4 kids that documentation matters, that evidence beats confidence, that duct tape sometimes tells the truth better than any testimony ever could. I still drive past that Pizza Hut sometimes. The parking lot looks the same. People still back out of spaces without looking. Physics still works the same way it always has. And somewhere in my phone's photo gallery, there's a picture of a gold Geo Metro that changed how my family thinks about justice. Duct tape tells no lies. That's what my mother used to say. And in the end, neither did we.